So, now let us first consider Anvaya, Vyatireka and their interpretation. In Dinnaga's frame of inference for others, instance should include the statement of both positive and negative concomitants. That is because the two concomitances which represented the second and the third characteristics of Hetu did not imply each other. One can argue here that in the universe of discourse outside Paksha, if Hetu exists only in Sapaksha, it follows that it is non-existent in Vipaksha, provided that Vipaksha exists. This follows by the force of the word only, which excludes the other possibility. In this way, the second characteristic implies the third characteristic. Similarly, if Hetu exists somewhere outside Paksha, but is definitely non-existent in Vipaksha, then it follows that it exists in Sapaksha, provided that Sapaksha exists. In this way, the third characteristic implies the second characteristic. Now, if in this way the second and the third characteristics imply each other, the question arises, why does Dinnaga state both? The possible answer within Dinnaga's framework is that the second and the third characteristics in this framework are contingent characteristics having existential implications. The second characteristic implies that there is Sapaksha and Hetu exists in it. Similarly, the third characteristic implies that Vipaksha exists and Hetu is non-existent in it. If the existence of similar and dissimilar cases, that is Sapaksha and Vipaksha, are presupposed or implied by the second and the third characteristics respectively, then the second and third characteristics cannot be reduced to each other. That is because the existence of similar cases is implied by the second characteristic, but the existence of dissimilar cases is not. Similarly, the existence of dissimilar cases is implied by the third characteristic, but the existence of similar cases is not. But the way Dharmakirti explains the two characteristics is different from the way Dinnaga does. Dharmakirti de-emphasizes the existential context of the two characteristics and expresses them by universal and necessary statements. The two characteristics then stand for Anvaya Vyapti and Vyatireka Vyapti respectively, which can be expressed by the universal statements of the form. Now, let us consider Anvaya Vyapti. For all x, if x has Hetu property, then x has Sadhya property, and Vyatireka Vyapti will be for all x, if x does not have Sadhya property, then x does not have Hetu property. It is obvious that the above two statements entail each other by the rule of transposition according to formal logic. Hence, Dharmakirti says that even if the argument from positive concomitance is made, the argument from negative concomitance follows and vice versa. The second question is Paksha, that is thesis, a necessary part of inference for others? As we saw, inference for others according to Dinnaga consists of three parts: thesis, reason and instance. Dinnaga's frame of inference was that of a strong analogical reasoning. Dharmakirti, on the other hand, was trying to develop the concept of inference as a sound inference, a formally valid inference with true premises. In the case of a strong analogical inference, we can say that its thesis, which could also be stated as conclusion, followed from its premises with some probability, but it did not follow with necessity or certainty. We can say, however, with reference to a sound inference, that its thesis or conclusion was entailed by its premises. It followed from them necessarily, and Dharmakirti was very much aware of this. As he says in Hetu Bindu, here we have not indicated the statement of declaration, that is pratijna, because the content of the declaration is cognized by force of the statements of paksha dharmata and vyapti relation. Dharmakirti strongly argues there that the statement of the thesis or the conclusion is redundant. The general policy of Dharmakirti is to avoid redundant statements in a logical discourse wherever possible. Now we come to the third issue. Is the statement of instance required? In Dinnaga's frame of inference, for others, just as both positive and negative concomitants need to be stated, each of them needs to be accompanied by an instantiation. That is because both the statements of concomitants have existential import. As against this, Dharmakirti categorically stated that separate mention of instance as an element of inference for others is redundant. Let us try to understand Dharmakirti's approach a bit more closely. There is a discrepancy in Dinnaga's account of the two elements of argument, namely reason and instance. How? He includes Hetu's existence in Paksha under the step called reason, that is Hetu, and includes the second and the third characteristics of Hetu under instance, that is Drishtanta. This division, however, is not reflected in the classification of fallacies, because according to this division, the fallacies based on the violation of the second and the third characteristics of Hetu should have been included under Drishtanta Bhasa, but Dinnaga includes them under Hetva Bhasa. Dharmakirti tries to remove this discrepancy in his formulation. For him, a good Hetu means Hetu with all the three characteristics. Naturally, all the three characteristics should be included under the step called reason, that is Hetu only. So, Drishtanta as a separate step in the argument loses its significance. Why did Dinnaga use the term Drishtanta for the statements of the second and the third character then? This was probably because these statements involved instantiation as an essential aspect of the two characters. Instantiation was an essential aspect of inference for Dinnaga, because his frame of inference was after all that of analogical reasoning. On the other hand, though Dharmakirti included instantiation in his formulation of Vyapti statements, instantiation did not play any essential role in his model of inference. For him, instantiation part was taken care of as subservient to Vyapti statement. Hence, Dharmakirti, while citing the examples of inferences, is not particular about giving instances. A glaring example would be the inference of impermanence of word based on its producthood. The negative concomitants of this inference would be like whatever is permanent is not a product. Should such a statement of concomitance be accompanied by an instance? Buddhists will have a problem, because there is no real thing which is permanent according to the Buddhists. In spite of that, the author of Nyaya Praveshaka Sutram stated the statement of negative concomitance as whatever is eternal is seen to be a non-product like Akash. As against it, Dharmakirti had no problem in stating the negative concomitants without instantiation. Hence, he formulates an argument from Swabhava Hetu as follows: there is necessarily no existence or producthood or createdhood without impermanence, and a word is real or a product or created entity. This is the argument from self nature as hetu. So, here no instance is mentioned.